Hello, Mary Beth. Welcome to the Sacred Remembering podcast.
So excited and honored to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to be meeting you. I'm really also excited, and I feel like I want to ask you everything at once. So I'm having to slow my roll a little bit here as we get started, but I'll just share with everyone listening how I came to recently know you and invite you to the podcast. If that's okay, we'll orient and
Please.
then, yeah, then we'll begin our share. So, on LinkedIn, in the LinkedIn world, there's this new kind of spiritual movement that's happening, which I think we're all relieved and
Yeah.
looking forward to. And Jake Housden introduced me to you as someone who has been, bringing some spiritual content, values content into organizational spaces, consulting spaces. And then we were on a call together, and you shared that on your journey in the past few years, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is like what I heard that sparked this, like, oh, she's a, soul sister. That you were walking this professional entrepreneurship, spiritual journey, and this pretty complex and long-term thing had happened in your life and was impacting you in a way that you didn't expect, perhaps, or that took a long time to get through and heal with. And so I was like, wow, she's a woman on a journey, and she just owned that in this professional space, in this spiritual space, like no shame, And I was like, I love how you just did that. And so, everyone, I have asked Mary Beth to come on here today and just talk about that journey of, yes, entrepreneurship, spiritual entrepreneurship, being a woman, on all aspects of our path. And when something long-term and complex happens, how we traverse that professionally, and in all of the other ways in our lives. And before this episode airs, on the previous few episodes, I have been sharing some of that as well. And so just really connected to that. And I wanted to bring like a normalcy forward for women who are listening, of like, we can be on this path, we can be very, very conscious women and still have shit happen. And then how we traverse that is sometimes brutal, sometimes beautiful, sometimes all of the above. So thank you for saying yes to the invitation to be here.
Yeah.
And I'm
It was a
excited to
full
get to
body
know you.
yes. There was no
Yeah,
question about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for just being willing to share, and the authenticity and the wholeness of the journey, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you
Yeah,
for the space to be able to continue to share. I think
yeah.
I will tell you, it really strikes me. Like my heart had a moment because
Mm,
you've said it now a few times to me of how I shared it with no shame. And
mm,
it's so powerful to receive that reflection from somebody who heard the story versus me telling the story. I don't know. I can assume certain things you're receiving, but I don't really know
mm.
that. And I've never heard that before from the way that someone has described a sharing of a story that's deeply vulnerable and trying, something that it isn't something that I thought about the component of shame attached to it
Mm,
before.
yeah,
And I was like, wow, I've come really far. And so you
yeah.
gave me a moment just now and earlier in our conversation of like, wow, that's such a milestone moment because shame
Mm,
is what stopped me from sharing that for almost my entire life.
yeah.
And so I wouldn't have recognized that compliment if it weren't for the healing that's occurred.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, ode to all of the previous versions of self that did not tell stories because of the shame that we would have felt, like, of not having it all together, or um Yeah, just not having like a bright, shiny
Fear of
situation.
judgment and
Yeah.
worthiness and whether or not you're lovable, all of those things for
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah.
thank you for being that mirror.
Yes, absolutely. And not to, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to pull back and ask you about your sacred remembering journey. But, like as we go through this kind of long term, um, like a long-term issue or a long-term healing opportunity, or however you want to phrase it in our lives, like I think that there is this caterpillar chrysalis sort of thing that happens where we learn to hold ourselves in a love that maybe a younger version of ourselves didn't have yet,
Mhm.
or a perspective that comes with maturity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to start by, all of us getting to know you a little bit more. And, sacred remembering is modern women waking up to the truth of who we are. And so I like to ask guests to just give us a little bit of your sacred remembering journey. So, what were like the highlights? You can start at any age. You can like tell us. I know that you love to ride horses, and you talk on LinkedIn about wanting to be a cowgirl. So there's this,
Yeah.
nature aspect of you. So yeah, just
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to where you are.
Yeah. I love this question because immediately when you said sacred remembering, I was like, that's exactly how this came for me. Like that's the phrasing that I haven't used before because it really has been a remembering. So I grew up in the city in Washington D.C. and I had a great uncle who has a ranch in Idaho, 100-acre ranch. He was a cowboy and a master woodworker, and he lived in an original Pony Express stop that he rebuilt by hand, and it's just this incredible craftsman, and it's like the most beautiful. It's like something you'd see in a catalog, the level of detail and love that and attention that's put into it from an artist doing this work. So I grew up going there and from the city and going into like extremely off the grid, not like, oh, I'm just putting my phone away because it's convenient. It's like you can't, there's literally no cell or internet.
Yeah.
Like it's just not an option as far as you're really out there. And so it was the opposite end of the spectrum of my experience in the city. And as a little kid, I went out and my mom like took me to the rodeo and got me a pair of white cowgirl boots, fringe boots, and her story she loves to tell is that she couldn't get them off. Like once I got like I wore them way past the way and they fit me. She couldn't get them off, and I would say that I was going to be a cowgirl, and it was just so far from my reality living in the city, living in Washington D.C. And then I started to horseback ride and do just things like little girls love to do, not competitively, just for fun, and go to camps. And I broke my tailbone. And in the process, I thought I can never ride horses again. And so I just told myself a story in middle school that that
Wow.
was over, that it was too physically painful to be on a horse, didn't make sense for me anymore. And I would go out to my uncle's and visit him on his ranch, but it was kind of more annoying because I didn't get
Mm,
to talk to my boyfriend, and
mm.
like I couldn't have the technology that I wanted. So I really went through a time of like not being attached to that side of me. I think mostly
Or
because
forgetting, not to put words in your
forgetting.
mouth, but like a time of forgetting, and then we remember.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
time of forgetting. And my family, even though we live in the city, most of all of our vacations were camping. And so I was very much in nature all the time, even though we were in the heart of the city. But it was an experience where I hated it because it was like this forced activity. It was like, doesn't matter if you want to go to vacation at a hotel, we're staying in a tent.
Yeah.
So I really had this built up experience of kind of pushing me away from that part
Yeah.
that my heart and soul really was connected to, because then here I was as a young adult. I went out to my uncle left he passed away, and he left the ranch to my mother, who
Mm.
is leaving it to me. And it's this experience where I would go out there by myself. And when you're that remote, you can really hear everything that's going on around you. And it's very startling when you hear something like a human's voice, because no one else should be out there on your
I
land.
just got chills. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that happened when I was out there on my first retreat by myself, so totally alone. I pulled out these binoculars and I started like looking at what's going on, and I see this gorgeous cowgirl moving cattle across our mountains with her daughter, who was probably like 8 at the time. They were getting this herd, getting a baby calf reconnected to his mother, and I just watched this, and something just shot through my body, like something just like zinged, and it said, "Pay attention. This is something that's inside of you. This is something you need to get back to." And so
Wow.
that was the moment, and I reached out. Her Cheyenne is the woman. She's now a deep soul sister of mine, and she's a cattle woman by profession. They're her cows, and that's what they do for a living. And so she's completely taken me under her wing. I asked her if I could shadow her one day and see what it's like to be a cowgirl, and she said, "No, but you can come work with me." So she's just been quite the queen in my life of saying, like, this is something that you can do now. This is not something you need to wait. Turns out my tailbone wasn't an issue at all. It was totally a story. Never was even something that created that. And then over time, I've just reconnected with horses when I'm here. Right now I'm talking to you from Baltimore, Maryland, and I work with horses. I train horses. It's not what I do for a living, but this past fall, for the first time ever, I did my first ever women's retreat, where we went to Tucson, and we had an experience with equine therapy, which is working with horses to have a healing experience within yourselves. It was the first time I really wove my work of my values work and well-being and healing work into horses. And it was the most incredible divine experience. So, because horses for me aren't just something that I ride and I want to achieve certain goals with. It's a soul level connection. It's a heart level connection. It's a full body healing every time that I get to be with a horse, and that they can reflect back to me what I need to remember about myself and what I need to know and be in tune with that's going on with them. And so this is like, I know I'm going it's a long story here, but I have to tell
No,
this
never stop talking.
This is the most exciting.
Keep going. It's so good.
Well, so over time, my dream, my vision is that one day on this ranch, this beautiful 100-acre ranch that we have, I'll be on a hike on our property, and I'll happen upon one of our horses, and I'll just get on the horse and ride with no equipment, no bridle, no saddle. Just have that level of depth of connection, of trust, of body awareness, and how to use the body and your intentions with horses that way. So that's been this like vision. And then I started doing that with horses in Maryland, riding them bareback and bridleless in the last 2 years. And so it's just been this really powerful healing journey for me as an individual, but also to connect with such a powerful animal with that level of trust with one another. I was supposed to go this year. I'm turning 40, and I was supposed to go to Bali for a women's retreat. I was so excited about it. I literally went to put my deposit down, and the retreat got canceled.
I was going to say, no, Bali is not your land. Like, you got to go to where your land is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I was so bummed because I went into victim mode, right? I went into like that. My birthday, of course, it has to be a struggle. Like, everything's been so hard. Why can't it just be easy? You know, I went into that whole thing. And then thankfully, my husband is an amazing human being. And he said, maybe this is actually you being protected. Yeah. Maybe this is not what you were meant to do, and something better is on its way to give you space for something better.
A redirection.
So and I was like striving and Googling and trying to find the next women's retreat I could go to. And it was just stressing me out. And I was like, wait a second. This is my year of power. That is not the kind of power that I'm actually looking for. That is letting my power go, right? That's like not having any belief that I can just be here and attract in what it is that I'm looking for. And so I shifted my energy into that. Within a week, I got a text message from the woman that I ran the retreat with, the horse retreat with. She said, if I could do this, I would. And I think it would speak to you. If you're interested, check it out. So I just got accepted to a 24-day experience in Montana where I am going to learn how to gentle wild Mustangs and then work with them bridleless and bareback.
Amazing. I have full chills. Yes.
Yeah, so
Whew.
it's like this is a huge part of my remembering.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
deeply, I never knew I even wanted to do this. But as soon
Yeah.
as she sent this to me and I knew this was something you could do, I
Yeah.
started bawling. Like I
Yeah.
was just crying. My whole
Hmm.
body was, once again, pay attention. Like
Yes.
this matters. This is not just a horse experience. This is a part of your journey to alignment.
Oh, 1,000%. And and I'm not reading your energy right now. We're not, I don't have consent to do that. So I'm not doing that. But
You have consent.
well, um, I'm always like sovereignty, energetic sovereignty, everybody. But you're actually okay. You don't know this about me, but I have this whole like women and land grid thing that I call
Mm.
Heartland. And so we're
Oh,
actually
yes.
like resurrecting the energetic grids and ley lines in the earth and like helping the earth heal from all
Mm.
of the like separation consciousness. I talk about how this impacted the feminine and women specifically. And when women connect with nature and, everyone notice how there's like a specific place with Mary Beth, like there's a place that you were raised, that you went to, that now you're inheriting this
Yeah.
and you're remembering who you are in conjunction with the land. And then we have like the horses and the nature that's also like I'm calling it like resurrecting. So you're actually also healing the land grids by doing this. Like we're elevating, and it's a new, how would I say this? Like a new grid of consciousness on the
Yeah.
earth. Like it's the new
I feel that.
way that consciousness will be held when like women are reconnected to land through nature rather than through the old grids of consciousness and separation and masculine feminine
Yes.
division. And
Yes.
so like I'm like, this is your heartland journey, like you are, yeah, this is
Yeah,
amazing.
Sarah, what you just said resonates with me so deeply because I, when I go out there, so we got our tiny home almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in July. And so it's in a slow, right? Like, so we got the solar panels and then we had to figure out how we're going to get our water because it's really like we have to hand carry our water in from a natural spring that's 5 miles away. So
Yeah.
it's a very big choice,
Yeah.
one that I love to choose. It's the best thing ever for me. It's the greatest activation of my values. And it's an experience of like, I have a huge vision of being there that is not just living there. It is to reconnect with the land in the way you're describing, but from a place of creating community within the land,
Mm.
from homesteading and from having better relationships with the water and understanding the wildlife. My mom has been so incredible with working with land preservation and
Mm.
conservationist groups to get the invasive species off the property, bring the native plants back in. So this is
Mm.
already happening
Yeah.
in this space in a very intentional way that I'll be carrying on and expanding on from the, particularly from the homesteading aspect, because it's the kind of thing when like this heartland concept and like being where I'm supposed to be. Literally, there's a the driveway is about takes about 15 minutes to get to where we are. We're on the top of a road that is like four other people can go off the road to their homes. And the people who wound up buying the property at the very bottom of the road, this just happened in like the last, I don't know, 5 years that they've been actively living there. They are the same age as my husband and I. They are already have they're right by the river, so they have don't have water issues. So they are growing. She just planted like 80 trees, fruit and nut
Mm.
trees. She has horses that I'm working with her to train and
Amazing.
gentle. we're creating a trail between our two properties where we're figuring out what are the best things that we can grow on our land and what are the best things that she can grow on her land, so that we can have this communal experience where we're supporting one another. They hunt, like they got a wild turkey the other day and just texted me. It was like, want us to put it in the freezer for you? I didn't grow up like this. I know other people did, and that's not that like out of their norm, but I'm literally in Baltimore City. Like I grew up in a very different environment. I didn't hunt or anything like that. And so it's just this, we've just been welcomed in. The universe has basically been like, hey, were you ever worried that you weren't going to figure this out? Here are all of the other souls that are right here that are not only available, but they are elated to develop loving, chosen family relationships and community with one another.
Wow. Okay, wow. All right. So I didn't know that we were going to start this way, and I'm so excited. And I'm like, yes, we are in the magic. All right. So you're on this journey, and there's all this remembrance and all this alignment. And you're saying yes to the path that you are meant to walk. And then simultaneously, there was also some dust that was kicked up, maybe like some karmic dust, some shit, some like, maybe energy that wanted to knock you around on that path a little bit. So this other thing showed up. So I love the way this is framed, because energetically it's super important. Like you just framed, like you're on your journey, you're on this soul journey, and you've been saying yes to it. And, we didn't talk about entrepreneurship, but we can get back to that, and so this is what matters. And so like you're saying yes to this. And then there's also this like troublesome thing, like a significant troublesome thing that came in kind of at the same time that this was happening, it sounds like. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Sarah. There's actually the last 2 years, as you mentioned, have really been the most challenging in my adult experience.
Me too. Solidarity.
And it started with my business. Let me back up. I've been very fortunate in that I have had a thriving business based on reputation and people recommending me to other people. Like I've been very fortunate that that's how I started. Like that was so, because I built myself up as a leader within my community, it was easier to make the transition to other people I was already working with from my last company, but now they were hiring me as a consultant. And so I didn't ever experience what it's like to be an entrepreneur who doesn't know who their next client is going to be, or who doesn't know what it feels like to like go from, I even said this, I remember we talked about this, go from having 10 podcast interviews a month to 3 in a year, like not even being asked to do things that aren't even something I'm getting compensated for financially, but just energetically, right? Being able to spread more out. And so I went into a place of myself of like, what is wrong with me? Like, what happened? Like, how am I such a failure, such a loser? Like, what happened? And so I wasn't giving myself the acknowledgement and the understanding of how I was not actually connected to my own power, how I was really hoping and praying that some guru, some course, some coach, some consultant would figure it all out for me, tell me the steps, and I would just be a really great student, because I'm excellent at that, particularly as a recovering work addict. I'm really great at doing all of the tasks all the time. And it didn't work, and we wound up basically burning tens of thousands of dollars in programs and coaches and things to try to figure out, like, how can we build a business where we live off the grid? How can we, that's what I was paying people to teach me, because I only knew how to go into companies and do this work. And so I was sure I needed somebody else to tell me how to do this. And in that process, we paid for our tiny home in cash. We were making really big financial investments in things that we thought were going to have a large return. So we get our tiny home and our property, something that was our retirement dream. Like we're 30 years ahead of our retirement dream. Woohoo! High of like getting to the top of the peak, feeling like, okay, finally something that we can say, you know, tangibly is going right for us. Within a week of getting our home, the largest wildfire to ever hit our region ever happened. And fire trucks were literally stationed in front of our property because where we live, it's in a gulch, and it's the perfect way to just completely light on fire because it's where the mountains come down. And so the wind can go straight up and just push fire up and take everything down. So for 4 months, I wasn't sure if we were even going to have land that wasn't burned to the ground.
Wow.
So that was kind of the first wave of punches of like, you can literally have a dream, build it up, take cash out, you know, buy a house in cash, put it on your land, be sure that finally the relief is coming.
Yeah, you're making it.
And then it just becomes the greatest nightmare of your entire life. So that was the first round of like, shit. Like, how am I gonna, what am I even doing this for? Right? Like, what is, like, obviously I have no control over anything, so why even bother? Right? And so that was the first wave. And then we recovered from that and had some little wins, but mostly we're still figuring out, what do we do with this business? How do we run this business? My husband and I run the business together. When I say we, that's who I'm referring to.
Okay.
How do we do this and live off the grid and still investing in other people telling us to do this?
Yeah.
And in the process, I still the business wasn't making the revenue that it had so easily in years prior. And I was really struggling with my mental health I was really struggling with my mental health. And in the peak of like struggling with mental health, I wind up getting sued by my sister for $100 million, both my husband and I and our businesses and others. But it was my biggest nightmare. It was like the biggest, it was like, oh, I thought the land burning down was my biggest nightmare. Ha ha ha. You didn't even know how much worse it could get than that. From just thinking you've overcome your greatest fear to recognizing that wasn't anything compared to what was coming next.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I relate.
So
so well said. I relate.
That was hard, you know. That was legit suicidal ideation on a very intense level. Yeah. Seeking a lot of professional support. Yeah. Going really deep into, like you were talking about, these like wounds. This is not like, oh, this isn't just some random thing that happened out of the blue. My family has a history of this type of trauma. I was abused growing up. I've experienced this type of suing and trying to take somebody else's livelihood away from them. My father tried to do that to my mother. And so it's like, I thought I was gone through the worst. Yeah. And then it was like, now it's happening to you. But I will say this, Sarah, some very interesting silver linings came out of that. First was, before I actually got the summons, the court summons, I had dreams, like very intense dreams that this was happening, that this was coming. I would wake up crying. I would literally go and say to my mother, it's coming. She's going to sue me. I know it. I know it's coming. I could feel it. My dreams are telling me. Yeah. And so I was having those dreams 1 week before I and so it's like, not like, oh, yay. But it was an interesting silver lining in, wow, my dreams are really powerful and something to pay attention to and to honor and to recognize they're a part of protecting me and preparing me for what is coming. And so I've been doing dream work for a few years now. And so it's those things were like the only things that I had going for me in that time was like, well, at least my dreams let me know.
Oh my gosh, Mary, thank you so much for telling your story because I relate so much, but when I know that people listening are going to relate too. So when we hear a woman tell a story, then we can say like, "Oh my gosh, me too." And like everyone listening, I'm like, it's because this woman's really powerful. Like, I'm like, you are a powerful woman. You're a medicine woman. You're connected to the earth. You were given this inheritance of such like value and love. Like you're here for this um like return of love on the planet. Like, I don't even know you. And I'm like, clearly this woman's very important. It's like that's what and then as you share your story, when you shared about the money just slowing down and your business that had worked like slows down. I experienced that also. And now I can see, I'm like, well, that's because we're in well, one of the reasons I think and feel, as a mystic is because we're actually in a great turn of the tides as far as how we acquire money, what we do for money, what money means. So in this consciousness shift from like I go out, I work, I earn money,
Right.
to I am in my power and divine alignment in connection with nature, and I am resourced from there.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing like you and your husband were consciously asking, like, how can we make that shift to, being in alignment with this new way, working off the grid and still making money. And then it also makes total sense to me that the coaches didn't have the answer because it's only those of us who are actually doing this huge, like committing with our whole lives. Like, we're going to find these answers and the
Right.
how, like how to live in this divine alignment and be prosperous. I'm all about it. People are hearing me talk about it all the time on this podcast. But like, we're going to figure that out
Yeah.
first because we're doing it.
Right.
And then it's so interesting. And again, I'm like, not even saying that I'm like reading in on your situation, but it just like to hear then there was this ancestral, like, and I'm saying ancestral because, well, I'm assuming because has something to do with family. It's your sister, right? And then it's this pattern that your mother and father also experienced. So there's like a repeat, at least through the lineage. You might even be able to go back
Oh yeah.
further and see. And so, like at this time of saying yes to your divine alignment, this massive piece, I would say soul piece, like soul material, soul curriculum, like comes in as like, oh, I thought my tools were equipped for my path. Like I was doing fine. And then, yeah, I'm just amazed. Like you said, your big yes. And then this came in, and I would say like probably to resolve or
It,
to clear
yes.
or to do what you can do in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I've been so fortunate to have a phenomenal therapist for a lot longer than the last 2 years. I
Yeah.
started working with her maybe, I don't know, maybe a decade ago. Um, and I hadn't worked with her, and then I started working with her again after this happened. And I will tell you, she said to me, "You know, Mary Beth, in all the years we worked with each other, we've never actually invested energy on your relationship with your sister. She's
Mm.
always kind of been like a side character,
Yeah.
never the main character. And there's a lot to heal there that we've never even touched. And what a
Mhm.
gift that we get to do that, right? What a gift that these
Yeah.
these wounds were always there. They
Yeah.
just were buried and they had a good coating over them.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how painful they were.
Yeah.
And so this gave me this opportunity for them to rise to the surface and treat them. And I will tell you, Sarah, in the hero's journey, I feel so grateful to be in a place where I can go back and talk about this and look at it from a place of a part of my journey and not being in the middle of that of my journey.
Mhm.
Because it's
Yeah.
very challenging to do that and have a conversation like this and not have shame, right?
Absolutely.
And
I
so it's
totally
really
know what you mean.
powerful since I guess it was probably November when we came back to Baltimore from being in Idaho, and it was just loud. Like,
Mm.
there's a bar on one side of me, there's a house being gutted on the other side of me. I'm in a row house where our walls literally touch, and the noise compared to being on 100 acres with nothing, like,
Yeah.
where if you hear a human's voice, it's startling, right? Like, there's fire trucks. I'm right in the city.
Yeah.
And so it was very challenging to be in Baltimore. It almost felt like I was being tortured. It felt like it's
Mm.
everything that could possibly say you don't belong here was what was
Yeah.
screaming at me. So I got the message. But the other thing that came in that was, all right, you're going to be here until you get back. So what can you do? And I just decided for so long I was trying to heal my own stuff and heal my business. And like they felt
Mhm.
like two separate things. They felt like two separate things on my to-do list. And I just decided when we got back and I was struggling so much just physically in the environment and how that was affecting me emotionally and mentally and spiritually, that I was like, I'm going to like go all in. One of my dear soul sisters, she just opened a studio here that does things like sound baths and Reiki and breathwork classes and yin restorative classes and women's somatics. So it was all very deeply restorative in nature. It's like, I'm going to check it out. Well, since November, I go to maybe 5 classes a week. I go to 5 to 7 classes
Mm.
a week. So it's a lot. Like, it's a very high volume. I'm not suggesting that other people do the same amount. It's what I needed because I decided that the only thing that actually mattered was my health and well being.
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
other things don't actually matter because those were just stories I was telling myself about being a failure. That was what was driving me, was me not wanting to be a failure
Yeah.
versus me wanting to love myself and to take care of myself. And
Yeah.
so November was when I made the decision, all right, I'm going to these classes, upping my therapy, doing the inner work, doing what I coach people to do, living in alignment with
Yeah.
my values, right? Like going out into nature regularly, doing things that felt like they were maybe luxurious in the past and maybe I would have judged myself for as an entrepreneur, thinking it was not like a good use of my energy if I could have been
Mhm.
like doing
Mm.
business development or something else.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, once I started to do that, within a month, all of a sudden, I start getting all these speaking engagement requests. All of a sudden, all these people who haven't been anywhere to be found in the last few years come out of the woodwork and say, I'm ready to start working with you as my coach.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden, I had 10 podcast requests in a week. You know, it was one of these just very timely and very important messages from the universe of it's like it's always an inside game. Like it's
Yeah.
always an inside game. And when you think the right thing you should be doing is something outside of you that is like a list of things that you need to accomplish, that's when you start getting out of what
Yeah.
the vibration you want to have to attract in what you
Right.
really want in life versus the seeking and the anxiety and the nervousness of what's happening next and what can I control. It's like, oh, I
Yeah.
well, what if I just love myself some more today?
Yeah.
What if I give myself
Right.
more permission to be human today? What if I took care of myself the way I want the people I coach to take care of themselves?
Yeah. Right.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and, like, getting everything into everything in alignment. Like, you know, your
Yeah.
actions, your interests, your self-care, like, where you invest your energy. Like, I'm hearing, like, it's all coming home, whereas, on this podcast, I talk a lot about masculine and feminine energy and a lot about how women have used and invested our energy in the past, where we had to play other games. Like, we had to invest our energy of like, okay, whatever is going on emotionally or in the mental health arena or energetically or whatever else we're sensitive to, it was like zip it up and go to work so that, we could climb the ladders, we could compete, we could achieve, we could have success, like either entrepreneurially or in a job. And, I think when people are talking about like, I want to bring my whole self to work, like we're starting to kind of collectively see the breakdown. Well, in many ways, we're starting to collectively see the breakdown of like, the old ways of working. And I mean, for me, it was such a shock of like, here I am talking about feminine and masculine, but when the work essentially stopped, very similar to what you were saying, it was like, looking back on it, hindsight 2020, it was like, you're not going to get away with this anymore. Like, you're not going to get away with this separation of like, yeah, I'm a mystic. I'm in the woods. I'm doing my thing. I'm making a podcast about it. Right. And then, like, but when I went to do my work, even though it was like spiritual, energetic, I was still showing up in kind of like a performance way. Not that I was being fake, but that I was like, I have to do something. I have to accomplish something. I have to like check boxes
Right.
versus no, like I'm going to integrate all of it. And I think what you said about like taking a period of time to totally devote to that integration, that makes so much sense. And then like, the universe, your guides, however you say it, they're all
Yeah.
like, oh, she gets it. She's doing it
Yeah.
now. Now
It
she
was
can
it
work
was
again.
it was wild. And the thing that I've been loving too, Sarah, has been, especially since the new year, there's been just massive, like, guess what? We're figuring it out. Like, we have
Yeah.
the things that our coaches told us not to do because we thought they were a good idea, but they told us they weren't proven practices. Those are the things that are returning for
Yeah.
us. Like, those are the things that are working. And I was just like, I knew it. I always knew it. Like, I knew it
Yeah.
in my heart the whole time. I knew that they had to be
Right.
wrong because
Right.
I deeply knew, right, that people
Hmm.
wanted to, like, we have this core values quiz where everybody told us quizzes aren't quizzes, people don't like quizzes, don't do quizzes, they're not. And I was like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, people take this without us even advertising it. People want to know this information, and everyone's like, no, no, don't do that. Well, the quiz is now the number one way that people get connected to our work, and like 100 people are taking it a week with not advertising.
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just powerful for people to tell you that you pay,
Yeah.
right? That that's not the way, but your intuition knowing that, okay, well, maybe like there's something else that's possible, but there is something here too, right? This is also a way. And I just
Yeah.
shut that part of me down. I just shut it down because I wanted somebody else to be in charge. I didn't want to
Mm.
be in charge. I wanted the easy button. And I'm just so grateful to be back in a place of like taking that power back, reclaiming
Yeah.
that power. I really put my power into the hands of other people for about 2 years, and being able to say, you know what, that's not how this works. That's not how this ever is going to work. Sure, there are certain things that you can outsource and automate and, use technology to support with, but ultimately it's always going to be coming from my heart and soul. And that is the differentiator. That is the
Yeah.
thing. It's not about like figuring out the algorithm or whatever else. We were
Mm-mm.
on retreat this past week, and it was so funny. We were meditating, and as we were meditating, I asked for a sign. I asked for a sign during my meditation, and literally when I woke up, somebody had just bought our course. Like,
Mm.
we've been wanting to create passive revenue streams for a long time, and we had two people reach out for speaking requests. And it
Wow.
was while we were on retreat, while we were meditating. I had no idea any of those things were going to be happening. Didn't know either of the people who reached out for speaking requests. I have no idea at the time. I had no idea how they learned about me or were even interested. But it was literally just this remembering of, we often think it's this controlled experience. Like, you put this
Yeah.
XYZ out and then you get ABC back, and that's how you run a business. Versus when you take care of your energy and you're aware of your vibration, you're being very intentional about how you are engaging with the law of attraction and what you're manifesting back into your life. And what I do for a living and for my own life is I teach people how to live in alignment with their values and how that ultimately makes you this incredible manifester. Because when you're vibrating in alignment with who you truly are, you're actually embodying those values, you're doing things that reflect that. That's when you're creating the energy you're going to get more of that you want.
Right. And values are they're ethical, they're values, they're heart centered, they're like what means something to you. So, it's not like getting in the alignment of I want to be rich. It's
Right.
getting into the alignment of like integrity is so important to me. Love is so important to me. And then like you begin living that, and that's what's attractive. It's real. It's love and heart based, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too because, right, you can absolutely have a value of wealth, but how do you define it, right?
Yeah.
Is it actual money? Is that like the wealth, or is it wealth of love? Is it
Yeah.
wealth of happiness? Is it wealth of connections? Is it wealth of health? Right?
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that you can be wealthy, and I think a lot of times when people say I want a lot of money, they don't go to the next step and say, well, for what? Like, what is the money?
Yeah.
What do you want the money for? What is the feeling you want to have? What do you think is the feeling you're going to have as a result of this? How can you just start feeling that feeling now to attract in more of that feeling, however it comes to you, whether that's through work and financial aspects, or if it's through relationships and deeper wisdom gained within yourself. There's lots of ways it can come to you. And so that's been really the most powerful for me, has been not only the opportunities to get more deeply connected to what I want to feel and how I can start feeling that now and not waiting for something to happen in order to
Yeah.
feel that way.
Not waiting till retirement to be a cowgirl.
Yeah, exactly. Or for somebody to give me permission,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's really a thing that I think most people, their entire lives, they operate by somebody else's values, somebody who
Mm,
has been the person who domesticated them, whether that was their parents or their community that taught them what they're supposed to care about,
mm,
or if that was in their work with their boss or the culture of their organization of like, this is what you should care
yeah.
about. And so you just embrace it because everybody else cares about it. So I guess I should care about it too. And then instead of following your own authentic values, you wind up creating an experience where you are following somebody else's and you don't understand why you're not fulfilled. You don't understand why you're not energized. You don't understand why you don't
Yeah.
have a sense of purpose. It's because you're never going to feel purpose when you're living out somebody else's values.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's really in alignment with the truth of who you are, as we say here. So a moment ago, you were talking about power and how you've been giving away your power. And the word that popped into my head was initiation. And so it was like this initiation, this time, this period of time, and this thing that happened with your sister and this like family, I the tendrils of how we're actually healing the ancestral trauma and the lineage trauma when we commit to like healing our part in these things, it's just so huge, right? So
Yeah.
that really is a soul initiation. Like we can say yes to those or we can say no. Like you could have said no to your own advancement and fought your sister in a really super bitter, ugly way. And, you know, like you could have taken another path, but you were like, I'm gonna take care of me. I'm gonna look at the heart. I'm gonna, you know, you chose a conscious path. So how was that time and that scenario like an initiation into you owning your power?
Mm. Oh, it was so bad. It was so significant. It was so
Yeah.
significant because the first feeling that I had when I got this was victimhood,
Yeah.
and that this was going to be the rest of my life, because that
Yeah.
was the history that I have. Like my dad did that to my mom until he died.
Ugh.
And so I was like, all right, this is literally the rest of my life. Like why am I even bothering to try to do something with my life, because
Mm,
all it is just going to be stuck in this suffering, and
yeah.
is it even worth it if I'm just I'm going to deplete all my finances and to just be okay? Like
Yeah.
is that really what I'm going here for? So it like immediately sucked all my power out of me. It immediately was like gave her all the power from a sense of it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. This is going to take the life out of you.
Yeah. Ooh,
Um,
right.
yeah,
Which
and it's
is like probably energetically the point.
exactly,
You know.
exactly. That was completely the point.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not it's not a legitimate lawsuit. Like there's nothing real about it from a sense of like it's really just somebody with a deep wounding, a significant trauma history that sees me having a better life and
Mm.
would like to have me pay for that.
Yeah.
And and that's what happens, I think, when you come from serious abuse too. It's like your power is taken away from you immediately when you're
Yeah.
born.
Right.
Because like the first memories that you have is somebody making sure you know you don't have power,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't have any say in this. Like this is going to happen to you no matter
Yeah.
what. And so when this resurfaced, it was
Yeah.
really taking me back that level of trauma history of like I have no power because
Yeah.
unfortunately the way that the legal system works here is somebody can sue you pretty much for the rest of their lives unless it's ruled a certain way, which it has not been ruled that way yet.
Mm.
So, like, theoretically, somebody could just drain somebody emotionally, energetically, financially, spiritually because they have the energy to
Yeah.
just keep filing, right? And I just knew that that was this situation, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what this is. So, to get to a point where you're struggling on a daily basis with suicidal ideation, that's like the ultimate taking away of your power
Yeah.
because
Mm.
it's saying I don't even have a reason to exist.
Yeah.
So there's no power there's no power here. And the thing that's so wild about this too is that when through this first round when the case got dismissed, I looked at my husband and I said, "How different would this have been if we just decided not to have given our power away?"
That, yeah. Well, wow. Full chills through my heart space. Yeah. I mean, powerful question.
Yeah,
And
like there's choices.
there are choices, and like we don't know what we don't know,
Yeah.
like at the time. And then, but I'm just so appreciative of what you're sharing, Mary Beth, because you're really showing like this incredible pathway. I'm just like, wow, this is such a huge story because like I'm hearing the one the mystic is like talking in the back of my head, you know. And so, yeah, going back to the childhood abuse and like I would call that like a soul break, like a purposeful like when you're using the word power, yeah, like when we're connected from the truth of who we are, the source of who we are so early in life, that's kind of an imprint. And this is where I do energy work actually. Like
Mhm.
I help reconnect people to the land and their soul. That's
Mhm.
like the energy work that I do. And so that breakage is actually like purposeful on the part of, you could call it the dark, like if we're talking about like good and evil or dark and light. Not that it always has to be that kind of polarity, but that these energetics do exist. Like people do hurt
Yeah.
children. And that's true in my story as well. And so I've looked at this so closely that, um, it's purposeful when someone else takes your power, takes the power of a child
Mhm.
that's specifically for their own gain, but it's so false. Like, as we're talking about standing in the truth of who we are and the alignment of who we are, that's the opposite of that. That's like, I'm going to steal power from someone else in order to gain. And so that question, what would have happened if we would have stayed in our power? What would have happened if we would have stayed in our heart?
Mhm.
It's like, I see that as like something we come to learn on this remembering path, because
Oh yeah.
that original breakage can never actually break us. Like it does. And then when things get hard, like, it's like, how do we find our way out of it? I would say, like, we find our way back to our heart, which is like the center of our energy field, connecting source and earth, like connecting us to the whole of who we are and the soul. And so we're actually like rebuilding the energy architecture of like what was broken as a child
Yeah.
in that power remembrance. So I hope that was okay that I just like went way out there with the
Yeah,
energy
of
stuff, because
course.
I'm like, this is incredible, the story you're telling. Um, yeah, and like we, to the point of today's conversation, like going through it as a woman, as a human, as someone who is like trying your best to live a conscious life. And then you're like, why am I getting hit with this fire? Why am I getting hit with this lawsuit? There's like a very real time of what the fuck, you
Yeah.
know?
And
Like,
like, how much more can one person take? Like,
yes, exactly.
and
Yeah.
and I think when you have a trauma history, particularly from childhood, as you can relate to, like as much healing as you've done, which I've done a lot of healing work on
Yeah.
all different dimensions, all different ways.
Yeah.
It's so powerful for me to see the instances like this one that everything comes straight up to the surface,
Yeah.
that you get to see quickly how much more healing is there. There's
Yeah.
so much more. That's a choice to be made. And I'll tell you, both my husband and I didn't know if we were going to make it through. And that's really tough when you and your partner are in the same level of depression, because it's not like one can lift the other up. And now I can tell you here, as we are maybe 6 months from our darkest,
Mm.
dark night of the soul experience, we feel so powerful. We
Good. Yeah.
feel like we can do anything, like we can get through anything, we can figure
Amazing.
anything out, we can lean on each other, we can hold space, we can allow the other person to be angry and not be triggered by that, right? Like we can, and it wouldn't have ever happened if we didn't make the choice to give our power away, right? Because we
Yeah.
needed to experience the awfulness of those lows to learn how strong we really were, to get
Yeah.
back to ourselves and to each other and to our purpose in this lifetime, and feel that deeply, deeply from like an
Yeah.
unwavering faith. That's one of my core values, is unwavering faith. And that's like, can be so hard when you're
Mm.
going through that type of trauma. It's like, how can I have faith when this is like the worst hand of cards I've been
Yeah.
dealt? Like, how did I get born into this, right? But then, like you
Right.
said, in the place that I am in now, and like even in those darkest moments, I knew my higher self, my conscious self knew that this was the work I was born to do for my family. Like this is what is like
Mhm.
required of me and my soul in order to create a deeper healing, not just for me and my
Yeah.
soul, but for all of my lineage,
Yeah.
everybody from the past and
Absolutely.
all those that are coming in the future. And even
Yeah.
in the present, I've had some very interesting reconnections with family who I hadn't been connected to
Mm.
because of this
Mm.
lawsuit. And that has created a deeper healing for me that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to.
Wow.
So again, like
Amazing.
these like silver linings that
Mhm.
I never could have guessed that were going to be a part of the package. But when you
Yeah.
choose to notice, have self compassion, and then have self care as a result of what you've noticed, right?
Yeah.
Like it really is a different way of living. And I'm so incredibly grateful that this is the work I get to do. This is what I get to help people
Yeah.
do. We were talking about this before. Like it's just so powerful when, whether it's through, giving a keynote speech, or coaching somebody one-on-one or leading our community or even just somebody taking a values course or finding out what their core values are. Like every single one of those things is deeply connected to why I was born in this
Yeah.
body, in this soul, like with this soul, like what I am here to help illuminate for other people. And it feels really great to not only like we were still coaching, I was still coaching people and leading people through our community group coaching during all of this and was
Yeah.
very vulnerable and raw with them while also able to lead and
Yeah.
have so much
Yeah.
catharsis for myself because I was coaching people and what I needed to hear. So it was
Right.
really powerful. And I felt just it's so incredibly important to honor your own journey and the work that you're doing because it
Yeah.
plays a role in your purpose.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, me too. And it felt so good during these last also 2 years for me when I was able to do the work because, and I just want to speak to this for a moment. It's like when you're struggling personally and I was struggling professionally in that as a single person, the trauma was with my family. There wasn't like financial support coming from anywhere else. So it was like, I needed to keep showing up, but my capacity to show up and do the work was definitely lessened. So, like, I would only show up when I was feeling good. And that was like not as many people were coming. I wasn't able to. I even stopped the podcast for a time. I was like, I don't even know what I have energy for. And but when people did come, or like when we did have the sacred remembering community calls, it felt so good to live the purpose. So I'm saying this because it's like we can be both. Like we can be these amazing professional women and like have this personal struggle. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation to help normalize this for anyone listening that's like, um, this like old expectation that we only show up when we only show up bright and shiny.
Right.
And I think it does make sense to show up and do the work when we do feel in that frequency and do feel in that alignment. Like, I think that makes sense. Like, I don't want to
Yes.
show up when we're like in the mud. And yeah, like we're still awesome even when we're struggling.
Well
Yeah.
said. Well
Yeah.
said. And have so much greater connection, like you were saying too. Like when you
Yeah.
share authentically and vulnerably with the people who are your people,
Yeah.
the only possible reaction to that is deeper connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
And as we're wrapping up, there's one other thing that I've heard you mention, but I want to revisit it again for listeners, like um, the topic of support and like when you noticed that you were struggling and you said like suicidal ideation. I've experienced that as well. It's like, okay, now's the time to get support and not try to do it all on your own. Like, do you want to say anything else about support and just
Yeah,
the
I
importance of it?
that one of my biggest stories, and it stemmed from my childhood trauma, was I'll always be alone.
Yeah.
And so like it didn't matter how many friends I had or how much people told me they loved me. I was always going to be alone because I had this like
Mm.
huge secret and this like huge
Yeah.
trauma that I had to keep to myself because I was domesticated to do that.
Yeah.
And that is the story that I think is the biggest wound that comes to the surface when I'm in a struggle, which I know many people can relate to, is like, I'm just alone. I'm just
Yeah.
so alone. No one could ever understand. This is like so messed up. People just not even, why even bother explaining because this is just so crazy. Like, there's no point. People can't
Yeah.
relate to this. And that's what makes you feel even more alone. That's like what
Yeah.
pushes you even deeper into your own darkness of feeling like there's no space for you, so you may as well just stay in that darkness and be alone. And so connection and community and asking for support is very vulnerable. It's very
Yeah.
vulnerable when you're in that place. And it is literally one of the only things you can do that will be like giving you a light inside of that tunnel, like turning it on, or asking somebody else if they can like light it for you,
Hmm.
just to get a spark going back, to know that like there are people who are actually not just saying that they're here if you need help, but they're actually here if you need
Yeah.
help. And I'll tell you, Sarah, it was challenging for me because I did reach out to a few people very intentionally, and of those few people, one decided not that they didn't couldn't be my friend anymore,
Hmm.
and another person decided that she didn't want to. It was too much for her to engage with, and she didn't respond to me for a couple of months. And
Yeah.
so I share that to also say, don't stop.
Right.
Like, learn. Okay, now I know that's not the person. They don't have
Mm-mm.
capacity for this, but that doesn't mean I don't matter, right?
No.
That
In
doesn't
fact, it
mean.
means you're like a bright, bright soul and you're going deeper than most. It's like, keep going.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to, because sometimes we're like, oh, reach out, people want to help you, but the truth is that they do, yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do not know what to do, and it scares them and they freak out and they're
Yeah.
worried. So go get professional help,
Yeah.
also, in addition to telling people that you love. Um,
Yeah.
and that started with me. I started by using a suicide hotline. That
Great.
was that was kind of my first, like, I didn't know. I just was so deep. I needed something immediately.
Yeah.
And then after that, I reconnected with my therapist and started to go regularly again. And she, did an evaluation and all of those types of things. And that was actually one of the most supportive things, because particularly because I had a relationship with her. She said,
Hmm.
"MaryBeth, here's the thing. Like, not only do I know that you're going to come through this and get to the other side, I know how much more powerful you're going to be as a
Hmm.
result of choosing to do the work, because that's who you are. This is a part of what you're here to do." And it
Yeah.
was like I needed somebody else to
Oh,
reflect that
yeah.
back to me, who was a professional.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because I was like, people are just being nice, versus the person who's literally there to do that with me
Right.
professionally.
Right. Yeah.
So that really served. And so I would encourage anybody who's feeling that way to really go at it from different angles, right? Like
Yeah.
within yourself, the things like going to healing experiences like you provide, right? Or like I talked about with going to a studio that had those experiences where I could just receive, sound
Hmm.
healing or whatever it
Yeah.
was for that day. And then also having a professional support, having people that you trust and that they'll hold that trust sacred. Sometimes you learn about that in your journey, and that's okay. That's a part of the process of learning. And but knowing you have those other levels of
Yeah.
going to your spirit guides, right? Like having a
Hmm.
connection to
Yeah.
nature, going to the divine space. There are so many levels that you can feel connection,
Yeah.
and to recognize that you're actually never alone ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And like the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, like supporting yourself on all of the layers and levels. And I'm a big fan of that. And like I hold really deep soul space for people when like it's when we're aware that we're in that space of women on a sacred remembering path. That's why we have the sacred remembering community as well. So like when those the friends who have been your friends since high school, but they're not doing the journey like you're doing the journey. Like that's one of
Right.
the reasons that we have the sacred remembering community, because all the women in there are doing the journey. But then yes, like taking care of your mental health. And like my therapist can't have the level of spiritual conversation that I would have like in sacred remembering or with my girlfriends who are also like deep mystics. And my therapist can talk to me about the childhood trauma effects of narcissism, or like reflect to me like you were saying, like um yeah, for me it's like some of these things when you're a spiritual woman. I think for me sometimes I was like, well, if I can see the soul, the why, if I can like see the big picture, then I put a pressure on myself to also um yeah, I guess maybe that's where I felt some shame, like, why hasn't this moved through on these other levels
Yeah.
yet, you know? And like my EMDR therapist, like trudging like through the mud with me on complex childhood trauma and like, you know, as long as needed has been incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
all layers and levels like
Yeah.
of help and support.
Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. Mary Beth, it's so good to meet you and thank you for sharing your honest, sacred remembering story. I at various times in this conversation was like, wow. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are having a Heartland sacred remembering story. Like I was like, whoa, the magic that is actually occurring here. And yeah, really, really powerful story and share. And so excited for you and your cowgirl journey and your Mustang journey. And
Thank you.
when do you go to this like 20, you said 21 day, 28
24
day,
days. It's like
24
basically a
day?
month. It's
Yeah,
mid June to
this
mid July.
summer.
Yeah, this
Amazing.
summer. This summer.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be here before I know it. But yeah, it's a huge part of taking my power back, right? Like
yeah,
investing in things that are for the sake of living out your
yeah,
dreams and
yeah,
your values and feeling that authentic energy and power coming from inside of you in a way
yeah,
that is just undeniable.
yeah. Feels really like soothing to the soul that has been through so much. So yeah, I wish you many, many blessings and much ease and, continued attraction and abundance and, yeah, blessings with you and your husband and the whole journey. And I'm going to stay connected.
Likewise, so looking forward to that. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me.
You're so welcome. And I want you to just take a moment, please, and share where people can find you, corevaluesquiz.com.
Yeah,
And
if you want to take the quiz,
yeah,
definitely check that out, corevaluesquiz.com. And as you mentioned, I'm super active on LinkedIn if anybody
yeah,
wants to connect there. MaryBeth Hyland, Hyland. And my other websites are for my business, sparkvisionnow.com, and the speaking aspect of my business is marybethspeaks.com.
amazing. Well, thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's so powerful. And I just know that it's going to impact many, many women and humans. So
Thank you.
thank you.
I hope so. I look forward to
Yeah.
staying connected.